Okay, so we have hit Devs episode 3. This episode, like the first two, is also directed and written by Alex Garland. Now we get this crazy open in this episode showing us distorted images again, and they throw a lot at you here. The first distorted image is of a hand touching glass, might be Forrest's hand, and then again we see Jesus on the cross. Then we see soldiers marching. And then what was really haunting was seeing Joan of Arc being burned to death. And then it goes to Abe Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. But what's important is then you see again Forrest's daughter blowing a flower here. So that tells you that we are seeing this all from the eyes of Forrest. And knowing that, it's interesting then seeing Lily put up the sign from last episode, the FU sign to the Russian spy. So Forrest is keeping an eye on what she is up to. So it was a really just cool opening to see. It got as weird as it can get. And it works super well to then go to a scene where you're getting again this screen, but now it's a more humorous take where Stuart and Lyndon are watching Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe get it on. This was some great comic relief, and those two have been playing as a comic relief, which is really good in a show like this that can be very serious, especially with characters like Katie walking around who's almost like a robot. But she says an important line that their two rules are only to look back using this mechanism, not to look forward, and that we don't invade privacy. This is clearly something we've seen Forrest already invade the privacy of Lily from the previous shot, and it just brings up an interesting point of have they not used it yet to look in the future? And then we get another great comedic line where Katie says to Stuart, would you be cool with everyone watching you have sex? And Lyndon goes, not so sure the system is powerful enough to look that far back in time. Some sharp comedic writing throughout this episode by Garland. The jokes were just landing. Humor's not usually his forte, so it's nice to see him kind of flex those muscles a bit. And what's interesting too is them bringing up like, oh, why don't you just watch Oswald again? And basically they're telling us that he killed JFK, confirmed through this device, but that's actually boring to them now. And it's interesting to see that these devs have all this info, very historic, important mysteries from our past, and know the answers to them and how that makes them as people now knowing it. There's just a numbness to all of them. And an important line here too where Stuart's like, don't break the rules, coming from her, talking about Katie. So Katie clearly has some skeletons in her closet when it comes to the employee code, which will surely get revealed to us later on. So you see now we kind of get this type of character we've seen a lot in shows like this where it's the government big brother thing going on here where we meet the senator, and right away you can just get from seeing the helicopter she's coming on, it's provided by Amaya. So as Forrest alludes to her later in the episode that he is giving money to her campaign, and this is kind of a back and forth relationship they have where they kind of threaten each other, but at the same time they're on the same side. And her case for coming now is just seeing what he's working on, and that she wants a piece of these systems he's using for America. He's selling it as they're using it as a quantum system to make a prediction algorithm. And she's like, so it predicts stocks, the weather, and he's like, sure. So we clearly know it is not that light of a case in what he's actually using it for, and if that even is the truth. So it might be interesting to see how much the government can actually screw up or help Forrest's operation. But it also makes sense to add that in because it adds more realism to this situation that obviously someone would keep an eye on this kind of operation, especially if the company is so successful into what they're doing. So when we check in with Lily, Lily comes back to work. And what I love here is when she comes in, you see some of the people on their computers, they're listening to that Joan of Arc audio we heard that was just haunting. There's a very horror vibe just underlying this episode, which we'll dive more into, but that comes from the intro to here and later on in a specific shot I want to talk about. But what's cool on watching this episode a second time, I appreciate it more, especially knowing that this was all Lily and Jen's master plan to get the security footage of Sergei that night that he died. I was completely fooled by this, and I think it made the episode kind of slower, not knowing what was really going on, which is usually the opposite case. But here I was like, what is going on? Where are we going with this? But once the twist was revealed, it made it for such an enjoyable second viewing, and I highly suggest you watch this one again for that reason. But you see when we meet Lily's supervisor has mechanical legs. I don't know if this is supposed to hint at something later on, even about her, what they do specifically in devs, because I did look up, this actress is not an amputee in real life, so there's clearly a point to her just having that, or maybe not. But you see how the plan works, that Lily shares her fears about Sergei to her supervisor to basically get clearance to talk to Kenton. Now, where Jen throws a curveball in the plan that didn't seem as planned was telling the supervisor that Lily has a history of episodes and being a schizophrenic. And we'll see as this episode goes on, there is a little fear there from Lily about this, because this could backfire, because you could think, well, can't they check this and check my medical history? And it might give leeway that they've been lying. Now, they also sprinkle in little lines that seem way important to me than they do on the surface, like this security guard of the senator, Joe, is talking to Kenton. And he has a line that he says to Kenton, what I would give to have someone take her out with a knife or gun, talking about the senator. Now, he's talking about being bored at the job he's doing now and is jealous of what Kenton's doing. But this kind of line also just foreshadows to me that when the senator gets her comeuppance, whenever that is, the key to getting rid of her is going to be Joe. There's a crack in the wall there. So now when Lily and Jen go and meet with Kenton, I love this shot they have of seeing Lily and Jen, but in the computer monitor, you get this villainous black silhouette of Kenton. And shout out to the actor here who plays Kenton. He's a great character actor, Zach Greener. And this scene's much more humorous on the second watch because when Lily's going and improvising this story, you see Jen's facial reactions and they're great. Like, what the hell are you doing? And I was hard on the actress of Lily, Sonoya Mizuno, last episode, but this episode, she was way better. I hope that the subpar acting that we saw in the first two episodes was more of like them when they shot the pilot and she was getting used to the character, getting a feel for it, because this was way better acting all around this episode for her. So I was really impressed and happy to see that. So credit where credit's due. And then we just get some beautiful cinematography. This episode is loaded with really pretty reflection shots, just seeing the forests come through on the windows when she's on the ledge. And what's really cool shot, which I also think was symbolic, was this medium shot of Kenton and her on the ledge. And you see the window cells are lining up behind them like crosses. And they almost are in the same two positions of the two sinners on the crosses behind Jesus that we saw early on. So that's just some interesting stuff to see there. And this just really fooled me good. There was a lot of suspense in this scene because I really thought she was at the state of suicide all of a sudden. But you see, this is when Jen gets the security tape on the USB stick. So it's cool that this was a twist episode, that you get revealed something that made this a lot more interesting than it actually was when you first see it. And we see that Kenton tells Forrest that Lily is a schizophrenic. And he's like, how do we not know that? But Kenton's saying that advantage they have because of this knowledge in one part is that if she tries to say anything about them or anything happens to her, they can blame it on that. And an interesting line Forrest says here, but nothing will happen to her, right, Kent? And he's like, yeah. And that's interesting because to me, that confirms any theories people had that Sergey wasn't as innocent as you may think. And that maybe Forrest isn't as bad as you think. Because he does have some kind of moral compass here that he doesn't want something to happen to Lily. He's not just out there murdering people who get in his way. Maybe he knew something really bad about Sergey. So when Lily goes back to see Jamie's becoming one of my favorite characters, and he gets a great line of humor here. And he says to Lily, you want to watch the man you left me for burn himself to death together? That's transcendently weird. I laughed out loud at this line. Again, Garland showing his comedic chops here and great comedic timing by the actor of Jamie. And where Jamie comes through here is when they're watching the security footage, he notices that every flame stays the same, showing it's not real. And they connect the body's real, but the suicide's the fake part and that they murdered him. I love now when I'm talking about that horror vibe is that transition they had when Lily says this and they show like the heart of the system in this dev's operation, and then it cuts to the outside of the statue and the fire reflecting into the statue. Just horrific imagery, and it works so well. And then it leads to what they're seeing, which is under the statue, where the footage is being rewound and it reveals that this was all faked. I love that Lily found this out already, because they could have dragged this out with her being behind the audience and waiting for her to figure out what really happened, which can get very tedious and boring. But they didn't. They know that shouldn't be the main plot of the show. They had her figure it out quick, and now we can kind of just go into full warpath here between her and the devs. So we'll see what happens. It makes me really excited for what's to come. I really like how they ended this episode. I wish every episode was out to binge. I'm ready for the next one right now. So that's just effective. It's that type of show that's like a Reddit show where week to week you're excited to theorize what's going on and want to just see what happens next. So I love that. It's very communal. Also of note, the closing song is just a choir singing over and over again. We are the fortunate ones who get to be whole again. This has to relate to Forrest and his grieving and to make himself whole again to get his daughter back. I feel like there's just subconscious hints to that being his end game and to bring her back to life. We'll see. This episode for me is getting an 8.5. At first, when I watched it first watch, it felt very slow, but second watch, it was a lot better. So I suggest this is definitely an episode to see twice. You'll appreciate it more. Great humor, great horrific shots, great cinematography, love the reflection shots, and great acting all around this episode, and a progressive plot really well with a good twist in it. And it makes you excited for what's to come. So yeah, I'm digging it. Let me know what you thought down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Any theories you have, bring them down under the comments. Let's get the discussion going. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews of Devs. I'll be doing every single episode. I'm also reviewing Better Call Saul at the moment. I also do celebrity interviews, so you want to check those out as well. Please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.